we love our tenants. Generally speaking, like it's been super harmonious. And now you've got ordinances like this, to me, that aim to sort of drive a stake in between tenants and housing providers. It's freaking bizarre that you've got people trying to do this. Very few buildings will trade under the protection of this ordinance. And all it's going to do is introduce a super complicated sales series of events that have to take place. It's like how you've seen what's happened with security deposits. Security deposits became sort of a legislative vehicle for tenants to sue landlords. And so what happened? Everyone transferred to move-in fees. And now we see legislation coming that's going to deal with those. I think the same thing is here. It's like you're creating a problem that there's no real solution to.
Welcome to another episode of the Straight Up Chicago Investor Podcast. I'm Tom Shawcross. With me as always is Mark Ainley. Mark, we've been doing a lot of live ones. It feels weird to actually get to do the welcome.
I know. I like the live ones because you get to put the guests on the spot, but at the same time, it's just I don't know. I get to see you in person. Maybe that's it.
Yeah, you know what? Either way, it's just fun doing a podcast.
Well, you did a live episode. You did Bigger Pockets yesterday here in the studio. How'd that go?
Lance set everything up perfectly. We had better. I'm gonna toot his horn. I think we have better sound quality and video quality than them when we're in person. So that was awesome.
No way. That's awesome. That's awesome. What was
that's
it?
all
like?
they did the sound check, and that's all they kept saying is like, "Oh my god, like this stuff's better than ours." And I was like, "Yeah, their 20-year-old Lance here just destroying it."
Who's the host? Like I haven't followed Bigger Pockets in a couple of months since David Green left.
Dave Myers now.
Dave. Oh, okay.
So. Yeah, been a little bit different of a flow. I wanted to talk a lot about Chicago. They were like, no, this has to be more scrubbed in general. So I had to keep my it was like a hometown like announcer. Like you had to keep keep it level headed.
Well, I hope you dropped the podcast on there, right?
I did, but I don't know if it's gonna it was actually very weird. I'll talk about the experience. Like it wasn't very conversational. It was like question, answer, and they're going to chop it all up. So I don't know what's going to make it. I don't know like how they do it. I think they're just looking they do like the question answer style because then they can do the clickbait, like I shouldn't say clickbait, like the teaser, and do it in a lot of different directions. So it felt awkward when it was done, but I'm sure like they, just like every episode, they edit it up, make it awesome and put it in there. We had the big sign behind for the how to contact me. I put the podcast page down. So hopefully it does help us out a bit.
Awesome. That's cool. Congrats on that.
So yeah, man. I mentioned you were episode 72, like 1,000 episodes ago.
Nice.
Before anyone there who's working there now was even working there, which is
cool. A couple of them were like in elementary school.
So all right, so let's jump in. Just before we get to the housing provider tip, like we're going to talk about this ordinance. If you're sitting here going, I don't know, like, I'm not going to listen to this one because I don't have property here. This absolutely affects you. Like this is very important. So please, spend the next 40 minutes tuning in and getting yourself informed because this will affect you here. So sure. That's just my disclosure here. Mark, if anything to add, or you want to just jump into housing provider tip?
I'll jump into housing provider tip because it kind of goes along with the episode today. So what I took from this episode and what I think about people always kind of know, but they don't necessarily really kind of let it settle until something like this happens. But, stay involved locally, whether it be on your neighborhood level, the automatic level, city or the suburb level. If you're in an HOA, on the HOA level, like I'm not saying you have to go cut the lawn or go write policy, but you have to know what's going on. You have to make sure that in the moments when you need to be able to defend your property, defend your rights, you're in the right spot to be able to stand up and say something. And if anything, those people, when you stand up and say something, they know you and you're a familiar face and you've been around and you're not just showing up in the 12th hour. So just stay involved. It's in your best interest. No different than you're going to be involved in your kid's school because it's in your best interest. It affects you.
Yeah, good point there. I like it. So, all right, let's jump in. Our guest today, friend of ours, I've done multiple deals with. Actually, we originally met from the podcast when he was on. His original episode was 32, so he's one of the OGs. And then we had him back on episode 190 to talk about Logan Square. Just a wealth of knowledge of Northside real estate as both a investor and agent. So without further ado, Luke Blahnik. Luke, welcome back, man. How you doing?
Good, guys. How are you?
I'm good, man. It's been a couple weeks since I've seen you. We need Renova to throw another event. That's usually how we run into each other.
Right. Random Tuesday nights in the West Loop.
Yeah, absolutely. Love it. All right. So, Luke, you were the one who you texted me this on like 10 p.m. one night saying, hey, have you seen this? You got to hold this before anyone else, I believe. Like, what is this ordinance? There's a lot of listeners here, a lot of brokers, investors who don't realize that they're affected by this. So let's do some educating at a high level. What's going on here?
Right. So everyone's probably seen like a headline saying some anti-gentrification ordinance has passed. All the media coverages kind of have that general headline, but I think what we need to do today is to dive into the actual ordinance itself and talk about what it is and why it impacts your listeners. So what this is it's an expansion of the predominance of the block ordinance that we've discussed years ago on this podcast. Remember that area 2 blocks north and 2 blocks south of the 606 trail that we talked about, where what the city did is they added a $15,000 demolition fee, and they added a restriction that you can only build a single family home you cannot build a single family home on blocks where your half of the block is less than 50% single family homes, which is the majority of that area. So they took that ordinance and they expanded on it widely. They're still calling this ordinance a pilot, and they have grown both the geographic boundaries of the ordinance largely, which we'll talk about in a second. They've increased the demolition fees and the reach of the ordinance, and they've added an entire new section to the ordinance that contemplates a tenant's ability to purchase a property, any rental property that you sell within this area. So it's all in the spirit of preserving the existing stock of affordable housing. That's what the ordinance aims to accomplish. Let's talk about how it does that. So first is the geography. We are moving roughly, and I'm going to use the streets. There's a specific map, but this is roughly the boundaries. It's Division Street to the south and Addison Street to the north. So 1200 to 3600 north. That's 3 miles. And it's Western Avenue to the east and Pulaski to the west. So that's 2 miles. So you've got a 6 square mile area that makes up largely Humboldt Park, Logan Square, and Avondale. And it also reaches into a part of Hermosa as well. That entire area now is governed by this ordinance, which goes into effect next week on October 9th. So it's really important that we all understand what it says. The first part of the ordinance deals with demolitions. And it says that if you demolish a structure within the boundaries of this area, you now have to pay an additional $60,000 surcharge on top of all other demolition costs. And that surcharge goes to a fund, which is the aim of the fund is to preserve affordable housing within the boundaries of the area. We don't know anything beyond that or what it means, but it's 60 grand to knock something down.
What was this fee before that? Was there a
15?
sort of?
It was 15 within the smaller pilot area. And the ordinance says that studying that, it was effective in limiting demolitions. I think really what happened was developers moved out of the area to the north and south of it because it also creates a difficulty in building new construction homes. So that's the rationale. Hey, let's make it way bigger. Let's make it 4 times more expensive. 60 grand minimum, $20,000 per unit. Whatever is greater. So if you knock a 4 flat down, it's 80 grand, a 5 flat, it's 100,000 and so on. So that's a demolition surcharge. And then the other restriction is that predominance of the block restriction, which says that you may not establish a detached single family home on a block on your side of the street where less than half of the structures are already single family homes, which is, I would say 90 plus, probably 95+% of the streets are 2 flats, 3 flats, 4 flats, multifamily. So no more single family homes. But you have to still comply with R3 zoning density and height restrictions. So you are allowed to build a 2 flat, but it has to be 30 feet tall or less, and it has to be under 0.9 FAR. So basically They use the single family zoning that's always been in place in these areas. And now you have to build a 2-flat under that sort of tight little box. So no widespread zoning relief, no R3 or R4, R5, go ahead and build a 3-flat zoning, none of that. You've got to build a 2-flat and make it look like a single family.
Yeah, just to reiterate that point there, like nothing to add supply, which is our biggest problem.
Correct. Yeah, no real zoning relief at all in the ordinance. I think that we'll talk about why in a little bit. So that's the first thing it does. The second thing it does, which is probably more impactful and probably more the more important piece, is the tenant opportunity to purchase block. And this section calls out that any tenant occupied property within this boundary has to follow some very strict time frames when you go to sell your property. And there's 3 kind of buckets that it falls into. One is you have to give your tenants notice of your intent to sell the property. And depending on your building size, that notice period is different. It's 60 days if you have a 5-flat or larger, and 30 days if you're smaller than that. We'll come back to what that notice means. The second thing you have to do is you have to provide your tenants with the offer that you've accepted and with a right of first refusal. And the time periods are different based on the building size under that as well. And then if your tenants exercise the right of first refusal, you have to provide them with a time period to close on the property. So you have to let your tenants know you're going to sell. You have to give them your offer, and you have to allow them to step into the shoes of the buyer and buy the property should they choose to do so. And then the rest of the ordinance deals with all the mechanics of that, how that works. So can we jump in a little bit and get a little granular on how it works?
Yeah, because at the surface level, it's like, oh, it's red tape, but it gets way worse than that. Like, let's jump into like how bad this is.
So let's talk about like a 5-flat. 60-day notice of intent to sell. You have to deliver in person or make a certified mailing to all of your tenants and keep the record for 3 years for all this stuff that you've complied with the ordinance. You need to provide the name, address, and phone number of all the owners of the property. You need to provide the address of the rental property, your unit count, so the number of units in your building and the number of bedrooms and bathrooms of each unit, the asking price that you're going to go to market at, a statement of your intent to sell, and a summary of their rights, so a summary of this ordinance. I think the biggest disclosure issue here is you're providing now your tenants with all of your financials and your rent roll for the building.
And why would that be detrimental? Let's talk through this for a second.
Sure. So
it's not obvious to everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've got disclosure issues. Your tenants now know how much everybody else in the building pays for rent. You have to provide them. Also, they may request after this a rent roll, vacancy rate for the building, and a 12-month income and expense report with all of your CapEx in the building. So you're opening your books to everyone in the building. An owner is opening their books to all tenants in the building, and tenants can now examine sort of the financial records of the building. So I think that it does a lot of things. The main thing to me is this is a disclosure issue. You're disclosing everyone's information to each other within a building, even if there's no real intent for the tenants to exercise the right of first refusal. This is a problem for an owner.
Let me jump in real quick. Like example here, you have the old lady. Everyone's paying. Market is $1,500. Everyone's paying $1,200, $1,400, $1,500. You got the one old lady at $950 that you just haven't touched because that's all she's on fixed income. Everyone's gonna say, why is she paying $950? Right? All of a sudden, like you have to have that conversation. Like, hey, like you almost have to increase her rent to everyone else's. Right? Like the lowest person there is going to cause problems for you. So now you almost have to make it uniform.
Sure.
You don't have to, but like you're going to be put in a situation where otherwise you would have let everyone be, like for whatever examples. But now that's going to cause issues.
This also opens up we're all realtors here. We've had open houses, and on Saturday, the neighbors coming over just to see what's going on in that house. And that's no different of like, I might not be wanting to buy this building from you, but since I have the opportunity to get access to this information, I'm going to express interest knowing I'm not going to fully carry through just to get that information.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, everyone's going to have access to it. Yeah. I think you're right. I mean, even if someone's on voucher or if someone has some sort of supplemental income, like this is public knowledge now, or at least knowledge to the building. So that's just your intent to sell. So step one, right? Step two is you've listed the property for sale. and it's on the market, and you take an offer on the property. So you're reviewing your offers as they come in, and you accept an offer. So now, the moment you accept an offer, you have a duty to provide your tenants with a right of first refusal. So you need to circulate the purchase offer to all tenants in the building and show them the contract price and what you've accepted for the building. And now they have a period in which to exercise their right of first refusal. For a 5-unit or more, that's 90 days. For a 3 to 4 flat, it's 30 days. And for a 1 to 2 flat, it's 15 days. So this period, you're waiting, your buyer hopefully is waiting, and then you're waiting on your tenants to see if they're going to exercise that right of first refusal. You may not ask your tenants for any financially qualifying information.
That's a huge one, right?
They have a unilateral right to accept it, and the moment they say they'll accept it, you have to accept that as the buyer now of the property.
So just to be clear here, so everyone understands that, like, it's like asking for proof of funds or a pre-approval letter in the market. You can't do that. They say they want to buy it. You just have to trust that the money is there, which is insane. And then go down this rabbit hole. It's like you said, it's unilateral.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it's as we go further, we'll see, scenarios in which like this could be used as leverage, or the right of first refusal. So you can require earnest money, 5% maximum, and the tenant association does have to post the earnest money that matches the offer. So if the offer was 5% earnest money, you can require 5% earnest money, but you can't require 10%. But if your offer was for 1% earnest money, that's all you could require from them. So that's the right of first refusal period. And then if they exercise the right of first refusal period, they have a time period to close. So if it's a 5+ unit, it's 120 days, 4 months to close on the property. Diligence in theory is happening during that time. And if it's a 1 to 4 unit, it's 60 days to close on the property. So the total time period for a 5+ unit from start to finish, if all the periods were fully stretched, it's 270 days, 9 months to sell a building. And I think the biggest inherent issue right away is that's just not how these buildings transact, right? A 5 flat probably sells normally, quietly to a private buyer, a 1031 exchange buyer, and the deal might take 30 to 45 days in totality, maybe 60 days. And now you've got 270 days, which eliminates just a large buyer pool for these buildings, which probably is the intent, but that's what's happening.
Well, sellers that are financially stretched or maybe going through a divorce, like, I mean, that just puts a whole nother bunch of pain points on something that's already painful for a seller.
There's people who have their rates expiring next year. If you took a 5-year loan in 2020, you're like, shit, I got to start trying to sell this now. You take 270 days. My rate's expiring next year. Like, it's insane.
Yeah, not even that point.
The right to transact on your own property has been taken away from you overnight.
Yes.
I think that one of the issues here that you see right away too is, Woodlawn has a similar ordinance that went into effect a few years ago, and I'm unfamiliar with it. I've just read about it over the last few days, but it sounds like 0 buildings have been purchased via this vehicle. So we're putting policy into place, or the city has put policy into place that does not do what it pretends that it does. And I think really what it does is, if you're a well-organized group, you can just essentially slow down or entirely sort of stop a sale. And now you've got a bunch of things that you could do as well, which just are disclosure issues. Now the contract is public. Everyone's information is public. And it's like, we can all imagine why there's a bunch of scenarios where this is problematic. So the knee-jerk reaction that we're hearing from landlords is they're saying, well, then why would you sell a building with anybody in it? Right. And so we've got an ordinance that the intention is to preserve affordable housing. And then the reaction is, why would I let people stay in the building if I'm going to sell the building? So we can see how these are in conflict.
So that is one exemption, is if the building's 100% vacant in the neighborhood, they don't have to follow this. What other exemptions are there? Are there any other owner occupied exemptions that falls here?
It doesn't seem so. So We don't know if condos are included. It doesn't seem like they are based on the language, but there's a lot of holes in the ordinance. It's not very like, you can imagine a bunch of different questions that are going to come up, which is a problem. But no, I mean, the exemptions are, you can transfer a property within your family. You can put something into like a trust. So like all of the maneuvering of a property that isn't really selling a property is allowed. A bank can foreclose on a property. Someone could take a deed of a property if you don't pay your taxes, things like that. But no, if you want to sell the property, even a majority interest with the same LLC, you must follow this protocol. It is required as part of the sale.
Is there a sliver of Pilsen that's included in this new ordinance?
I don't know. In reading the ordinance, and I'm not a lawyer or a legal expert, as probably clear by now, but I don't see it, but it's possible. I understand.
I didn't see it either, but I've
some,
heard people say that. So I guess I didn't know what I didn't know.
Yeah, I don't see. I know that the predominance of the block also affected Pilsen, and it does reference that in the ordinance, but this map that's drawn on this ordinance does not show Pilsen. No.
Okay.
So I want to take a go ahead, Luke. Yeah. Keep rolling.
No, it's okay. So I mean, that's the meat of it. If you fall out of contract, the time starts again.
Oh
so
my gosh!
If your buyer bails, you don't have to give notice that you're going to sell the building again, but you have to give the new contract, the right of first refusal period resets, and the right to close on the property resets as well. So that's on a 5 flat 210 days that would keep spinning.
So
it is shorter
go into years then, like potentially it's to sell a 5 flat. Like if, someone all the way to the finish line and then died at the table because interest rates went up, like you go spin into a whole nother year.
Yeah. And I mean, the early return or feeling that brokers have, like, especially the larger building brokers, are like, why would anyone buy a building in this area? Why would you buy a building within the boundaries where you're not going to be able to sell it easily? And there's sort of, through the expansion of that first pilot program to this pilot program, we all kind of, one, what's coming next, but two is there's probably going to be more. So like, why? And I think that probably that's the intent. Like the intent is slow it down, depress values, keep it cheap, which is where we get into sort of like the constitutional questions of, is this allowed? And I don't know the answer. I know that there's a lot of people trying to find the answer right now, fast, but it doesn't. We don't know.
Talk to us, Luke. Who are all the people, all the different groups that are kind of up in arms about this? Like they're shocked, they can't believe, they're pissed, they're furious. Share with us kind of who those are.
Well, to me, like the damage hasn't been done yet, and I think that you've got your building owner associations. Like anyone who's heard about this immediately is sort of kind of like, building owners are outraged. I think like if you're a tenant, you either probably don't care, or this could be interpreted as good. It's protective in some ways. But immediately you've got building owners who are outraged, and you've got homeowners, like 1 to 2 flat, 3 flat owners who are finding out about this, and they're saying, "Wait, what? Like these timeframes affect me? I've owned this building for 30 years in Logan Square, and I can't sell it the way I want to sell it now." And I think that that's just starting, right? Like this piece, this public education piece, which is saying, look, this went through super fast. No one saw this coming. It was introduced on a Tuesday at zoning, and it went to City Hall on a Thursday, and it breezed through with really no discussion. This substitute
with no input
ordinance
from the housing industry. That's asinine, right? Like, I'm sorry to interrupt, but like that's the crazy part, that even if this doesn't affect you, that everyone needs to be aware of, is this city, which takes, my last zoning review took over 6 months, but this zoning review took less than 48 hours to dramatically change the equity in a 6-mile radius without any input from the people in the industry. Like that's asinine. Like that's criminal. Like I don't understand like how that can happen in a city, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, you're scratching your head going like, wait, so a lot of these alder people govern with this idea of transparency and community meetings and community process. Like if you want a zoning change, for example, you're introducing it through the alderman's channels and you're putting it out to the public. There are renderings, there are meetings, there's conversation about affordable housing, about density, about size, about facade. It can take years. to get even a small building approved. The way that this went through, you're right, Tom. Like, there's a lot of question marks about this, saying, okay, why wasn't the same process followed that is followed for every other project that goes through? And I think we all know the answer, which is like, you've got a collective group who think that this will be good for real estate or good to protect the affordable housing. And I just fundamentally disagree. I don't think it's going to accomplish what it aims to accomplish. And I'm equally frustrated with the lack of community involvement and clarity in the process. I think it's really, really, really bizarre.
Yeah, it's just insane, right? And I call it what it is too. Like, this does nothing to provide affordable housing to the area. It does nothing, right? If you own a building now, and now that you can't sell it, you're just going to jack up rents till everyone leaves. Like that's the game plan, right? Until you have a vacant building or people are going to pay you outrageous numbers. Like, that is the only way now. You know, we have, with Jeff, we have a building that falls in this on Addison. So we assume that it does fall in it. So like, you have this now and saying, okay, well, you know, we're even handcuffed by like this. The same day we got our Jefferson Township taxes that went up 40% on the building. Like, what do you want us to do here?
I think too, like, I mean, there's several issues. Like, one is the city's broke. We need money from transfer taxes, from additional development. This doesn't do anything for that. This shuts down real estate transfers. Transfer taxes go to zero or lower in the area. Not helpful. I think two is like, I mean, I was a tenant for 10 years in Chicago. I still rent my office space and a bunch of different spaces around town. I'm still a tenant. And I'm a housing provider now too. Like, I've bought some 2 flats, 4 flats, and now some bigger buildings. Like, we love our tenants. Like, we have great relationships with our tenants. And generally speaking, like, it's been super harmonious. And now you've got ordinances like this, to me, that aim to sort of drive a stake in between tenants and housing providers. And that, again, is like, it's freaking bizarre that you've got people trying to do this. And there are community organizations that will try to essentially unionize or create an association of tenants. And they're going to try to turn the tenants against the building owner. And like, look, if you're a deadbeat building owner, the city has recourse against you. They can write violations on your buildings. There are methods to stop you from being a piece of shit. But like, this doesn't do that. It doesn't accomplish that. If we could look into a magic ball into the future, I don't think any or very few buildings will trade under the protection of this ordinance. And all it's going to do is introduce a super complicated sales series of events that have to take place for unsophisticated property owners who are going to be out of compliance, and they're going to get sued. It's like how you've seen what's happened with security deposits, right? Security deposits became sort of a legislative vehicle for tenants to sue landlords. And so what happened? Everyone transferred to move-in fees, and now move-in fees are sort of like getting out of control, and they're going to have to be, we see legislation coming that's going to deal with those. I think the same thing is here. It's like, you're creating a problem that there's no real solution to, and it doesn't do anything except stop housing in its tracks, discourage people from investing in their housing, and completely slow down the city's accumulation of revenue through transfer taxes.
I can't even imagine how a lender would be willing to loan on a property in one of these areas as well too, just because they have no easy out, or their borrower has no easy out if there is ever a distressed situation.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't talked to a bunch of lenders yet about it to see like what their angle is going to be, but you're right. I mean, if you can't sell your building, if your building is now illiquid, you can sell it. I don't mean to be using such, if it's extremely difficult to sell your building is much less liquid than it used to be. Why would you want to lend in that area, right? Like that's a problem. You don't want to foreclose. Lenders aren't in the business of foreclosing or owning properties. That's like financially disastrous for them. So I think you're right. I think buyers naturally, if you're out of a buyer from another market, one, you're probably not going to invest in this area because it's dangerous. But two, I think this does widespread damage to the further sort of degradation of the reputation of Chicago as a place to invest in real estate. You've got these ordinances here that make it very difficult, and the rules change overnight, by the way. You know, like, you don't know what you're going to wake up to the next morning because these ordinances just slide through. So like, why would you invest here? You have a fund, you can invest anywhere. but again, maybe we're making the point for the intent, which is to hold down housing and hold down values. So this is where it's interesting. It's like, I don't know exactly where to go from it, but I think there will be a lot of next steps. But I think first and foremost, we need to let people know what it says and how it affects them.
Yeah, and I saw it was signed for January 1st, but it sounds like this actually takes effect in October.
Yeah, no. The original ordinance that was drafted in July and circulated was for January 1st. The substitute ordinance that was put through City Hall at the last minute takes effect immediately. So it says, upon acceptance and publication, and I think publication technically is next Wednesday. So Wednesday, October 9th. So imagine this: you have a 2-flat owner listing their building for sale next Friday. They're in violation. They didn't provide the notice. They have violated this ordinance. They could be sued by their tenants. So it's like, what are we doing? The ordinance references a bunch of forms. We have not seen the forms from housing. It references, the protocol, which we don't have any of that. So we're working to try to get our hands on it to say, look, what's the form we need to provide to people? How do we post the notice on the door that you're asking for us to post? But no one has any of the information. So it's a bit disorganized.
Yeah, this is just wild. Like if you think of, like you mentioned, anyone who's owned in Logan, sat out through the rough years, here they are. They're we're going to sell this thing. We're going to move to Florida. And now it's like, no, you're not. Or you will with a bunch of red tape, and you're going to take a lower number now.
I think you're right. I think that the person that loses the most, it's not the buyer. The buyer doesn't have to buy. It's the seller. Whoever owns these properties is the person that's losing money here. So if you had a property that is run down and it's sort of at the end of its useful life, well, it's $60,000 more to knock that property over today. So the builder or whoever's developing the property, they're putting that in, they're factoring that amount into their financial calculation. Your property is now worth $60,000 less. So that's a taking, right? And then you've got anyone that owns, let's say, like you've assembled like 3 or 4 buildings on your block, they're all worth less because it's hard to sell them and buyers are scared. So you've taken from the owners who have invested so much and seen these areas come up, and now they cash out with less when they go to do so. It's sad.
And the other thing is, there's a lot of people 15 years ago or so that took chances on this entire area, all those different parts of those neighborhoods where the values weren't there. The rents definitely weren't there. I mean, we're renting 3-1s in Logan 7-8 years ago for under $1,000. And people took those chances, and it might be discouraging for other investors to take chances on other neighborhoods that could be evolving, and because they're afraid something like this is going to happen in that neighborhood.
To me, the writing's on the wall. Like this expansion geographically of the pilot program to now 6 square miles is teed up for another expansion. So you're going to see it. Like if this doesn't affect you, should you be concerned? Yeah, you should be concerned. This is a problem. A growing sort of geographical boundary with 4 times the amount of demo fee that used to be involved here. So like you can kind of see what's going to happen. And I think, Tom, you're exactly right, which is like, we care, like we all recognize that you cannot have workforce housing with an inability to be able to rent a place somewhere. Like that's a problem. That's a problem for the city. It's a problem for the socioeconomic health of the entire ecosystem. But this isn't the way to do it. You didn't consult housing providers when you're drafting this ordinance. We're not sitting around talking about how to bring more housing to the area or how to legalize basement units in a easier fashion. Like there's all these ways where there's existing housing stock sitting on these streets that goes unutilized. Maybe the city of Chicago is sitting on vacant housing for years that's never deployed to somebody. Or like blanket upzoning. Why not say, look, instead of this R3 bizarro restriction of a 2-flat within an R3 shell, which by the way is just going to become a single family home with like a rental unit in the basement, which is like not the point of a 2-flat. Why not say blanket R5 zoning? Look at the streets that exist as they are. They're all 3 and 4 flats. Those are R5 compliant structures. Why not just pass blanket R5 zoning and say, okay, you can't build a single family home, but you can build a 4 flat. Great. Guess what? New 4 flats everywhere. But again, I don't think it's the point. I don't think the point is more housing.
It's not. Like they're saying they care about affordable housing. They do not. Like I'm gonna be crystal clear right now. They care about votes and tenants vote. Right? Like that is what this is for. Like let's call it what it is. Like no, there are people within the city of Chicago who do care about affordable housing. There are people like Steve Vance from Cityscape who like devote their life to affordable housing in the city. As someone who's born and raised here and is going to live here and die here, I care about affordable housing because we need it for the city. Like there's people who give a shit. These aldermen are not them, right? That this is not them. This is insane. I'm going to use, and this is when this first got brought up, I'm going to use the example. I added an affordable unit to a property I have that would fall under this zone here. I added an affordable unit. The cost on that, it's like 100K rehab, whatever, that. But my additional cost from the city who wants affordable housing, I had to pay $5,000 for a zoning attorney. I have to pay, I'm going to do an undisclosed amount here for a suggested consultant and a suggested donation to said alderman. I had to do another $7,000 for a new set of permits and 5 months of holding costs. That's about 40K. So on top of the 100K rehab, the city cost me another $55,000 to add an affordable unit. So they can say, yep, we really care about affordable housing, Mr. Housing Provider. Here it is. Like you have to pay $55,000 to do this. The next time I get that situation, I'm going to duplex down the unit. I'm going to have another $4,500 a month unit, and instead of having 2 separate units. And I'm going to get Mr. Mean Developer displacing people. Like I don't know what else to do. Like it's bullshit. So I'll get off my soapbox. But like this is like a breaking point. Like this is just insane.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you're saying. Like, these are elected officials whose job it is to represent everyone in the ward, and to me, this is a massive failure in that regard. It's not protecting. I'm very curious to see how it plays out and who it protects, because I don't think it will have the consequences that are intended.
So what happens next, right? Like, so we need to be aware of this. If you're an investor, if you're an agent transacting in this area, like we need to understand all the terms and what's going on. But what happens next? Like, how do we try to get things where it works for everybody? Well, what are the next moves here?
Well, I mean, the first thing, Tom, is compliance. Like this is the rule now. So as your fiduciary to your clients, like I'm a broker, I help people sell buildings. I can't let them screw up and get sued. So first, understand the ordinance and follow the rules, because it's the rules. So this is what's happening. So I think there's 3 prongs. One is community awareness. No one, including the tenants that this is designed to protect or the people that own these buildings, know that this happened or what it says. Virtually nobody. So we need to let people know what it is. And that's through like spreading the word and canvassing and handing out flyers so people know, hey, don't screw up, don't fall out of compliance, don't get sued. And like tenants, here are your rights. So awareness is number 1. 2 is we need to be talking to our leadership and our alder people. If this is concerning to you, call your alder person and talk to them about it and ask what happened. There were only 3 dissenting votes on this bill that went through. So only 3 people read it and said, this is crazy, and did not vote for it. I would say call your alderperson, no matter who they are or where they are, and ask them why they support it and if they're concerned about the future implications of it. And then the third is perhaps this will be tested legally. So this came from the Department of Housing and Law. The city of Chicago will represent and will defend this ordinance. They're confident that it's legal, but I think that will be challenged, and I think we'll see what happens when it gets challenged. And so if you're interested in being an activist here or getting involved, be on the lookout. There's definitely going to be neighborhood groups rolling out with like, hey, here's a fund that you can donate to if you want to contribute, and there will be like grassroots efforts to sort of try to either modify or get it redacted or taken away.
Yeah, you guys, anyone listening should definitely go to mboa.com, to mboachicago.com to just sign up to follow all this, because they've already sent out a couple pieces to everyone following them. And if you want to jump in, if you want to donate, if you want to participate in that, that's one of the grassroots places where you definitely could go to. And also, the realtors are going to take a stance on this, whether it be CAR or IAR. I know they have some things in the works as well too. So I'm not sure if they are going to be ultimate people that might file suit on something like this.
Yeah, I think that's all coming. Yeah, the NBOA, the Neighborhood Building Owners Association, is a organized and active group, and definitely they're going to be taking some action here. And yeah, like you said, the Illinois Association of Realtors, or the Illinois Realtors, will probably be involved shortly as well.
Man, all right. Not the sexiest information, but obviously very, very important information we need to get out to everybody. So Luke, thank you for being on top of everything.
Yeah, you bet.
Mark, we ready to wrap here?
We're ready to wrap.
I know, Luke, this is we've had you on 2 times. So let's see if you have the same answers or not.
All right, Luke, what's your competitive advantage? How have you been able to do so much in what you do and actually be out ahead of things like this while others wish they were as good as you?
Wow. So I get to toot my own horn. I think I don't know, just showing up and being thoughtful, like doing the hard work and making sure that you do what you say you're going to do is unbelievably effective at helping you get ahead. And when people realize that they can count on you like over and over again, then the phone rings and people ask you for help, and that can be rewarding. So that's it.
Yes.
All right. What is one piece of advice you would tell someone that is yet to buy their first property here in Chicago?
Study the new substitute ordinance and choose wisely on the location that you're choosing to invest in. Yeah, and buy a nice brick building first on a wide lot, because they're beautiful and they're underpriced.
All right.
Love
it. The realtor came out in you there on that one. All right. What do you do for fun?
I hang out with my growing family. I've got a 2 and an 8-year-old, and yeah, we kick it, and I'm learning Rubik's cubes and magic tricks, and kind of returning to my childhood and enjoying it the second time around.
Oh, it's great how Rubik's cubes that came back, and they're so much more intense. They got like 8x8s. They got all the crazy Rubik's cubes stuff.
It's real, man.
Yeah, my son started playing chess, and I don't really know how to play, so it's like exposed me. Like I'm here googling moves. So, all right, what is a good book, podcast, or self-development activity you'd recommend to our listeners?
I recently read Unreasonable Hospitality by Will Guidara. He's a hospitality guy in the restaurant industry in New York, but he writes a really good book just about like pleasing people and how to go the extra mile when the opportunity presents itself, and how that can sort of have like an outsized impact on somebody.
Yeah, it's huge. I read that one. It's a good one. What's a resource you'd recommend to other Chicago real estate investors?
That's a great question. I mean, we'll talk about this process for a second. So like I was in student council all through high school, and I was on the student body in college, and I came to Chicago and kind of just like felt like always that city office and aldermanic stuff was all like outside of my purview. This has woken me up, which says like, get involved, start going to your aldermanic meetings and bring your opinion and bring your ideas. I think that you can, and we can collectively have like sort of an effect on how this goes. And for too long, I personally have just been quiet and non-participatory. So I would say get involved early, and it should be good for you to do so.
All right, Luke, thank you so much. You provide a ton of insights on this episode, a ton of value to our listeners. How can they learn more about you? Is there any way they can provide value to you?
No, I mean, look, we're always willing to talk to owners or aspiring owners about how to buy a building or how to sell a building. So like, we're happy to be your broker, happy to work with you if you're looking for something on the Northwest Side. But otherwise, get in touch, follow us on Instagram. My partner, Anthony Flora, and I run a real estate team called Flora Blahnik, and you can find us on Instagram if you can spell Blahnik. So good luck with that.
Anthony, the silent assassin of the group, keeps keeping you guys together.
Absolutely does like 95% of the work, and I take all the credit.
I know. I've asked him to come on. And so Anthony, if you're listening, stop being shy. Get on. We'll get you on. We'll
He's
get an
not
episode with
listening.
you.
He's not allowed to listen. He's working.
There
I'll
you
let
go.
him out of it.
All right, we got our Chicago fact to wrap up here. Mark, who we playing for? Who's sponsoring?
All right, today's sponsor is Kaiser Group, and who we're playing for is Trevor White, who bought his shirt on Straight Up Chicago Investor merch store. Trevor, if myself or Luke get this question right, you'll get a $50 gift card brought to you by Kaiser Group.
All right, sounds good. All right, so Luke, I know you Mr. Oak Park now, so I figured to get an Oak Park question. Are you at your house right now?
Dude. No, I'm in my office.
There you go. All right, so Franklin Ward Wright Home and Studio is a historic house and design in Oak Park, obviously designed by him. The home had several massive renovations, but it was originally built in which year? And your options are 1860, 1889, 1912, 1931. 1860, 1889, 1912, 1931.
1931.
No, it's earlier than that, I think. 1912.
1889, boys.
Oh, really? So is all his stuff that old?
Yeah, and he extensively remodeled it in 1895 then, when he had his sixth kid.
Oh, man. Well, Trevor,
he was ahead of his time.
Yeah.
Sorry, Trevor.
Yeah, Trevor, we'll put your name back in the hat. Thank you for purchasing something off the Straight Up Chicago merch store. And you'll get the chance again to play again. So, oh, man, we got that one wrong. I thought I was way off on that
Just
one.
deflates everything.
Deflates
cut
everything.
the episode.
Yeah, we're never going to air it.
We're done.
All right, Luke, thanks coming back on here. Tom, thank you as always. Listeners, share this episode. This episode is probably one of those more than ever you need to share with other real estate investors, other realtors, get the word out, because there's a lot of information that a lot of people need to know here that, you know, can potentially affect everyone's net worth here for the next couple decades. So please take this message, share it. Episode, we'll have clips, share it on Facebook, share it on Instagram. We appreciate any spreading of the word that you can help us with. Luke, thank you. Tom, thank you. Listeners, we'll see you next week.